Imagine a chilling tale unfolding in the quiet, snow-draped landscapes of Niigata Prefecture, a region nestled in the north-central heart of Japan's Honshu Island. Here, where the coastline stretches along the Sea of Japan and the city of Niigata anchors a bustling urban hub, a shocking crime quietly brewed in the shadows. Welcome to Kashiwazaki, a coastal city in western Niigata, home to the world's largest nuclear power plant, Kashiwazaki. But beneath its serene facade lies a story so haunting it would shake the nation to its core. In the peaceful Yaza residential district of Kashiwazaki lived the Sato family. Just two people, 73-year-old Mrs. Sato and her 37-year-old son, Sato Nobuki. Mrs. Sato's husband had passed away years earlier, leaving her alone with Nobuki, her only companion. But this was no heartwarming tale of mother and son. Nobuki, far from being a support, refused to work, leeching off his aging mother while treating her with cruelty. Diagnosed with severe mental illness, his mood swung wildly, and he often unleashed his rage on her, sometimes even striking her with an electric whip. One day, unable to bear his violence any longer, Mrs. Sato made a desperate plea. She filed a request with the local health center, begging them to admit Nobuki to a psychiatric hospital. Little did she know, this decision would unravel a horrifying secret that had been hidden in her own home for nearly a decade. Let's rewind the clock to January 28th, 2000, and uncover the dark truth that stunned Japan. It was a frigid Friday in Kashiwazaki. Thick snow blanketed the streets, and icy winds howled through the city. At 1:30 p.m., a team of 7 health center staff and city officials arrived at the Sato residence, determined to enforce Nobuki's compulsory hospitalization. Mrs. Sato had first reported her son's abusive behavior 4 years earlier, in 1996. She described how he beat her relentlessly, his violence escalating over time. Back then, she'd refused home visits, fearing his explosive temper. Instead, she collected psychiatric medication for him, hoping it would help. But Nobuki's condition only worsened. He began attacking her with an electric whip, tying her up if she resisted, even denying her basic needs like using the bathroom. The situation grew so dire that doctors insisted on forced hospitalization. After years of hesitation, Mrs. Sato finally agreed. To confirm her claims, officials had visited the home before, but Nobuki locked himself in his room, refusing to cooperate. This time, they were prepared. A task force was assembled, and January 28th was set as the day to act. The Sato home was a 2-story house in Yaza. The first floor, marked in blue on the layout, was Mrs. Sato's domain. The second floor, in orange, belonged to Nobuki, who forbade his mother from ever setting foot there. An extension, highlighted in yellow, spanned both floors, with the new and old sections of the second floor connected, while the first floor extension stood separate. The house had a main entrance and a side door. To prevent Nobuki from fleeing, 2 team members guarded the side exit, while the other 5 entered through the front. Inside, they passed through the entryway, turned right into the living room, then followed a hallway on the left to a staircase. Climbing 14 steps, they reached Nobuki's domain on the second floor. Standing outside his bedroom, they announced they were there on Mrs. Sato's behalf to help him. Without waiting for a response, they pushed open the door. Nobuki was asleep on his bed. Startled awake, he erupted in fury, shouting, "Who let you in here?" His screams grew frantic as he thrashed wildly. The team restrained him and administered a sedative. But the drug took time to work, and Nobuki fought fiercely until it finally took hold. As he calmed, something strange caught their attention, a faint movement beneath the pile of blankets on his bed. Using scissors, they cut through the layers and froze in horror. Hidden inside was a pale, emaciated young woman, dressed in oversized, filthy clothes. She trembled, clearly terrified. The team demanded her name and address, but her responses were incoherent, her voice shaky and disjointed. Medics suggested she was too traumatized to speak clearly. They brought her downstairs to Mrs. Sato, who was stunned. "I had no idea she was here," she stammered. insisting she'd never known another person was in her home. By 2 p.m., the girl was rushed to a hospital. On the way, she finally spoke lucidly, revealing her name, address, birth date, and parents' names. The city official taking notes gasped in recognition. Before them was Sano Fusako, a girl who'd vanished 9 years earlier from Sanjo City at age 9. Now 18, her decade-long mystery was finally solved. Sano Fusako was born in November 1980 in Tainai City, Niigata Prefecture, the third child in an ordinary family. Her father was a farmer, her mother a homemaker. In 1990, Fusako was a polite, obedient fourth grader living in Sanjo City. On November 13th of that year, her school hosted a baseball game. After classes, she stayed to watch, leaving for home alone at 5 p.m. As she walked, a man with a knife, 28-year-old Sato Nobuki, ambushed her, forcing her into his car and driving her to Kashiwazaki. For 9 years and 2 months, he held her captive in his second-floor bedroom. Fusako lived in constant fear. Any resistance was met with beatings or threats. She never left that room, surviving on 1 meal a day, often going hungry. By the time she was found, her muscles had atrophied from malnutrition and immobility. She couldn't even walk. To keep her hidden from his mother, Nobuki forbade her from leaving the room, forcing her to use plastic bags for sanitation and banning her from bathing. In 9 years, she'd washed only once and rarely changed clothes. Police were called immediately. After fingerprint confirmation, they identified her as the missing Sano Fusako. That evening, her mother drove 50 kilometers from Sanjo to Kashiwazaki, reuniting with her daughter after years of anguish. Back on November 13th, 1990, Fusako's parents had grown frantic when she didn't return home. Her school confirmed she'd left after the game, prompting a massive search. Over 200 people, police dogs, and helicopters scoured Sanjo, distributing 22,000 flyers across Niigata. Suspects were investigated, but Kashiwazaki, far from the crime scene, was never considered. Theories swirled, from accidents to abductions by North Korean agents or the Aum Shinrikyo cult, but no evidence emerged. Meanwhile, Nobuki was admitted for psychiatric treatment. 2 weeks later, police arrested him for kidnapping a minor. Born in July 1960 in Kashiwazaki, Nobuki was the only child of a 62-year-old taxi company owner and his 36-year-old second wife, an insurance worker. Spoiled by his elderly father, Nobuki grew up troubled. Bullied for his father's age and his own quirks, like a soft voice and obsessive cleanliness. He developed mental health issues, including OCD and a phobia of dirt. After high school, he worked briefly at a factory but quit, refusing to leave home despite his parents' pleas. At 19, he expelled his father from the house, forcing the old man into a nursing home. His violence escalated, once setting fire to a Buddhist altar. Diagnosed with OCD, he was treated briefly but never improved. At 23, he demanded his mother expand the house for more space, costing her 7 million yen. At 27, he was caught harassing a schoolgirl, earning a 1-year suspended sentence. 2 months later, his father died at 89. During his probation, he kidnapped Fusako, undetected by police due to poor interagency communication. For 9 years, Nobuki kept Fusako imprisoned, beating her over 700 times, often with an electric whip. She was tied up for a year, her will to escape crushed. Some speculated she developed Stockholm Syndrome, but experts later dismissed this, citing her paralyzing fear as the reason she stayed. In court, Nobuki faced charges of kidnapping and illegal confinement. Over 2,000 people attended the trial, the largest in Niigata's history. He claimed he saw Fusako as a friend, teaching her about horse racing and cars, but police countered she complied only to survive. His mother was cleared of involvement. She never entered his room, and Fusako didn't know she existed. Psychiatric evaluations diagnosed Nobuki with narcissistic and obsessive-compulsive personality disorders, but he was deemed legally sane. Despite his claims of hallucinations, the court sentenced him to 14 years in prison. After his release, He moved to Chiba Prefecture and died in 2017 at 55. Fusako, rescued at 18, was celebrated with a coming-of-age ceremony by her parents. She changed her name and started anew. This story ends here, but its echoes linger. From a criminal psychology perspective, Nobuki's case reveals a volatile mix of untreated mental illness, childhood trauma, and unchecked aggression. His disorders amplified his need for control, turning his room into a prison for Fusako. His lack of empathy and distorted reality, viewing her as a companion, highlight a profound detachment from morality. This tragedy underscores the critical need for early intervention, interagency coordination, and societal vigilance to prevent such horrors from festering unnoticed. Goodbye until next time.